Okay, so in this video I would like to provide you a manual to create a project on AndroidThings. Okay, very similar to create a project for your phone. You can go to File, you click on New Project, you choose the path to save your project. Yeah, I can create a new folder like AndroidThings. Okay, you provide the name for your project, so this is the first project, and you can put whatever you want. Okay, if you want to change the package name, you can click on edit and you change it, but if you don't, you just click to next. Okay, so this is a very important step to create a project on AndroidThings. Actually, you can use the API 19, which is the best to develop an Android applications and then install it on AndroidThings if your application doesn't access to any hardware of the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so if you don't need to access to any hardware pins of the AndroidThings, you can choose the API 19. But if you need to access to the hardware, and normally you need to access to this hardware, you have to choose the AndroidThings SDKs instead of phone and tablet. Yeah, and you can see you have several options, and you should choose according to the recommendations of the Android Studio, and it is okay if you choose for ABI 26 here. Okay, so please remember to select the AndroidThings SDK and you click next, and everything is as usual, but just for AndroidThings you only have two different template activities instead of many templates as in your phone, and you should choose the empty activity. Okay, this is the first step to create the application on AndroidThings. Yeah, the Android Studio also create two default file for you. One is the Java file and one is the layout or the UI for your project, and you just click on finish. Okay, so after the project is created, I would like that you should check a little bit on some generated file. Firstly, this is the activity. Okay, so this is the extend from main activity. So if you use another version of the Android Studio, it can be the app combat activity. So please try to change the app combat to activity only, because some library are now not really supported in AndroidThings. So when you create a project on Android Studio, maybe the version of Android Studio is very updated and it is not really matched to the version of the AndroidThings which is installed on your Raspberry Pi. So please remember, firstly, this is the activity instead of app combat activity. Alright. Yeah. The second thing you should check, which is the on build.gradle on create. Okay, so everything like normal, but you see you have the library for AndroidThings. Okay, so when you choose the SDK for AndroidThings, you have this line, otherwise you don't. Okay, so if somehow you choose API 19 and you don't have this line, so you can add it later, but it is better if you can choose the right SDKs from the beginning. Okay, this is a very important library for you because you need to access to the hardware of the Raspberry Pi, and this is the hardware layer abstractions for you. Okay, we should check a little bit on the manifest. Okay, so you have uh, it is like a kind of directions. Okay, we use the library which is dedicated for AndroidThings. So in this case, you can see if you want to simulate your app on your phone. Okay, you don't have the Raspberry Pi, but you want to simulate your app. So you can create a simulation by go to uh, Tune or Build. Sorry, you can click here and you can create a virtual device. You can choose the API which is minimum 26 because this is the SDK versions for our applications, but you have to comment or to remove this line. Okay, remove this line. If you have this line, and you cannot download your applications on the simulations because we don't have the AndroidThings library. You have to remove this line, and maybe you also need to remove this line also. Yeah, so you just need to press Control and left slash. Yeah, you press Control and left slash. Okay, and then you can install your app to the simulations. However, normally we use the simulation on AndroidThings just to test the UI only. Yeah, because normally we need to access to the hardware. This is the reason why we need the AndroidThings and the Raspberry Pi. And if you command the library, you cannot access to the hardware anymore. So normally we use the simulation just to test the UI. And if you want to install uh, your application, you need to test on a real Raspberry Pi. Okay, so in order to install the Raspberry Pi, you need to check where you install your SDK by go to the tool and you select Android and you select Android virtual device. You go to the SDK Manager, which is here. Yeah, you should remember the part you install your SDK location. This is here. You open the command line and try to go to this folder. Okay, so because I am installed uh, my SDK under this part, yeah, so I go exactly to the part of the SDK, and I need to go to one more folder which is the platform tools. Okay, yeah, and in this folder I can execute ADB connect. Yeah, and I provide the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so when you install the Android things on your Raspberry Pi, there is a setting UI. So please open it and try to connect to a network. On your PC, you connect to the same network and you use the local IP to connect from your Android Studio to the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so if you have any error when connecting to the IP address, you can indicate the port for your connections, which is default is for number 5. All right, yeah. So if the connection is successfully, you're gonna see the Raspberry Pi, which is appear in this list, and just choose the Raspberry Pi platform and click OK. Yeah, this ADB Connect is just very similar to how to connect to your phone by a USB cable. Yeah, using your phone, you don't need to execute the ADB because you connect directly by a USB cable. But for the Android things, at the beginning, it is easier for us to connect to the Raspberry Pi using the Wi-Fi connections, but you have to connect them in a same network, okay, to have the local IP, and then you can install your app to the Raspberry Pi. All right, okay, so good luck for your first applications, and if you have the Raspberry Pi at home, please